On February 9th, 1989, we lost one of the greatest manga artists of all time. Osamu Tezuka died of stomach cancer in Tokyo Hospital at the age of 59. His death devastated Japan, and fans all over the country mourned for the loss of the god of comics. A great cloud formed over Japan, and the streets would be lined with people in mourning. Oh, also some dude named Hirohito had died like 4 or so weeks earlier. I think he was like some kind of emperor or something, and so some people may have been pretty sad about that as well. But this video isn't about him. Tezuka, throughout his entire career, was a definite workaholic, always working on manga and animation through thick and thin, and this was true even when Tezuka's health began to fail, including 1989. Famously, it is said that his last words were, "I'm begging you, let me work," which he muttered to the nurse that was taking away his drawing tools in the hospital. With his death, he left us with 4 unfinished works, which will be the focus of today's video. I'm going to be introducing you all to these 4 works. I'll be giving my thoughts about each one, and then I'll end this video with a list where I will rank the series in order of what I wish was finished the most. Okay, so the first one is a bit of a technicality, but it's Phoenix. The reason that I say it's a technicality is because while, yes, the final volume of Phoenix released, Sun, was completed in 1988, but he intended to continue Phoenix even after this story. After his death, a rough plot summary of the next story in the series was found, which was to take place in 1930s China. It's not known how much longer he would have kept the series going. Some fans have suggested he planned on continuing until it reached the present, but unfortunately we're just never going to be able to know for sure. So, getting into the manga, taking a very brief and simplified view of the series, it's an anthology manga that's both historical fiction and science fiction. It sort of centers around various Buddhist themes and teachings such as reincarnation and karma, and uses them in order to tell the story. The thread that connects all of these stories together and makes it an anthology is the bird of fire, or the phoenix, which usually pushes the story along in some way or another. The manga originally began serialization in Manga Shonen in 1954 before being cancelled after 8 installments. Then, it moved to Shoujo Club in 1956 and ran on until 1957. We wouldn't see the manga appear again for 10 years when, in 1967, it returned, but this time in Tezuka's own manga magazine, Calm, which would publish multiple parts of Phoenix up until 1973 when Calm went bankrupt, shortly after he began Part 9, Civil War. But, like a phoenix out of the ashes, it returned in 1976 in a different magazine titled Manga Shonen. And again, multiple parts would be published until 1981. The final part published, Sun, would appear in Wild Times magazine from 1986 until 1988. Phoenix is widely considered to be Tezuka's life's work, and I just cannot do the story and history justice in this video because I'd be here talking all day about it. And we've got 3 more manga series to cover. One last thing I want to say, however, is that Phoenix is just one of my favorite manga series of all time, so I definitely plan to give it its own video one day. Whether that's a review or essay video, only time will tell. Up next we have Neofoss, which is a highly interesting work from Tezuka because of the fact that this was his 3rd attempt at adapting Faust into a manga. Tezuka was obsessed with the play Faust by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, reportedly having read it multiple times in junior high school, and clearly it left a big impression on him. The first time he adapted Faust into a manga was in 1950, published as a red book, But not only was this his first adaptation of Faust, but it was also the first in a series of manga adaptations he did of classic literature. Later, he'd go on to adapt Crime and Punishment in 1953 and Merchant of Venice in 1959. His second adaptation of Faust came in 1971 in his second line book series, which ran from 1971 to 1973, published by Shukan Shonen Jump. The story was included in the book titled 100 Tales. Neofoss would be the final time he would adapt the play, however, with the first part being published from January 1st, 1988 until November 11th of that same year. Then, following that, the second part would be published from December 9th, 1988 to December 16th of that same year in the newspaper Ashi Shimbun. Originally set to be an animated film in 1984, the project was soon abandoned, so he just began to publish the story as a manga. But as his stomach cancer worsened, he too had to abandon this project. The plot of the manga goes like this. It's about an aging scientist named Professor Ichinoseki, who is unhappy with his work even after 50 years of research. He plans on committing suicide, but then a sorceress named Memphis appears before him, offering him a new chance on life. She presents him with a contract that will make him young again, but in exchange, he has to sell his soul to the devil once he is satisfied with his life. He agrees and is made young again, but he forgets everything about who he is and how he ended up where he is. Soon afterward, he's adopted into a rich family, however, and after the head of that family dies, inherits a fortune, thus being able to begin his research to create living things for his own purposes. And this is where the manga leaves off, just after the second chapter of the second part. Now, remember earlier when I said that Ichinoseki is adopted into a family and that the head of that family dies? Well, it's actually very morbid and pretty depressing because the way that that character died in the manga was due to stomach cancer, which would be the same disease that would take Tezuka's life less than a year later. To date, this manga has never officially been translated into English, which is a real shame because I definitely like to read it. In fact, none of the Faust manga he did was been translated into English, which is quite a shame because of how important the story was to him. The next unfinished work from Tezuka was Ludwig B. Ludwig B is the second semi-fictitious biography that he did, this time of the life and career of the great composer Ludwig van Beethoven. Now, the first work of this type that he did was the wildly successful Buddha, which had ended its serialization in Comic Tom in 1983 after having been in the magazine for a decade. Ludwig B was created in order to replace this series, once again running in Comic Tom, and began serialization in 1987, running right up to his death in February of 1989. Tezuka, being a big fan of classical music, was very excited to work on this project, and even traveled to Austria in order to do research. It tells the story of the life and career of Ludwig Beethoven, but adds fictional elements to his life, such as the character of Franz, the son of the fictional Duke of Krusenstein. Franz hates anyone by the name of Ludwig, and once he finds Beethoven, he begins to harass the up-and-coming composer, even being responsible for why Beethoven is deaf. Now, this manga is actually available in English. It was published by DMP in 2014, so I've read it, and frustratingly enough, however, Ludwig B ends on a cliffhanger sometime in Beethoven's young adult years. And finally, we come to Gringo. Gringo was a business thriller that began serialization in Big Comics starting in August 1987 and running up until January 1989. Gringo saw Tezuka experimenting with his writing style and even free-handing the panels and layouts. He also based the main character Himoto Hitachi on real-life businessman Wakoji Nobuyuki, who was kidnapped in the Philippines. The manga tells the story of Hitomo Hitoshi, a president of the Edo Corp branch office. Hitoshi is demoted, however, after the executive director Yabushita resigns, resulting in Hitoshi being moved to Escarda in the fictitious Republic of Santa Elena. After arriving, he learns that the country is enthralled in a civil war between the government and a group of guerrilla fighters. He ends up discovering a lucrative business opportunity, however, after learning that a rare material located underneath the stronghold of the guerrillas' hideout was essential in the development and building of electronics. He ends up taking advantage of the guerrilla leader to get the mining rights, but things quickly go awry, however, and this is where Gringo unfortunately ends. The manga has never been officially published into English, but just from the description, I really want to be able to read it. And with that, we conclude my introduction of the 4 unfinished works from Tezuka that he left behind in 1989. Now we come to the part of the video where I'm going to rank these in order of what I wish was finished, starting with the least and progressing upward into what I wish was finished the most. Starting at the bottom, I'm going to have to put Ludwig B. While I liked what I read, I'm just not too interested in a manga biography of Beethoven's life. Though I will say again that it's very frustrating that the manga ends with a cliffhanger, but I'm perfectly fine with what we have now. Next, I'm going to have to put Neofoss here. This is just ground that Tezuka has already been over, and so I'm not too upset by the fact that it isn't finished. I will say, however, that I do appreciate the creativity in adapting the story, but it's just not really enough to get me interested. Getting closer to the top, I'm going to put Gringo here. Now, this manga actually interests me greatly. We've seen Tezuka touch upon the genre of business thrillers before in Chapter 3 of the Book of Human Insects, and judging from his work then, I really think that this could have been a fantastic manga. Gringo just sounded very interesting to me right off the bat, and I wish that he could have finished it. And finally, of course, the manga that I wish he had finished the most was Phoenix. I've talked about it many times before, but Phoenix is one of my favorite manga series of all time. And of course, I would have loved it if there were more stories to the series. I'm really interested in knowing where Tezuka would have taken the series. I want to know if he was going to bring it up to the present or if he was just going to keep changing the time period again. This series was just ripe with so much creative potential, and it's a real shame that he never got to truly finish it. And with that, I conclude the video. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you found today's topic interesting. The death of Tezuka was truly a great loss to the world of comics and animation, and these 4 titles end up being sort of his final words to the world. Again, I hope that you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you on this channel again real soon. That's all for today. Goodbye.